just want to say a few things about who we are as an organization. So we are a national public history organization. We focus on documenting Jewish women's stories, elevating their voices, and inspiring them to be agents of change. And we do this in a lot of ways, most notably through the educators in our community of educators like yourselves, who are really on the ground doing this work. And when we talk about our education work, we're thinking about how do we inspire change? How do we transform communities by sharing these stories? And how do you all do that by sharing these stories? We really think about sort of the meeting or intersection of stories and role models from the past and how that relates to students today in their own lives. And I think Debbie's lesson does that very well. So she'll be talking a little bit about that, but really thinking about what motivates people, what brings people to action or inspires them to action, and then having students reflect a little bit on, okay, what did these people do? Why were they doing it? Who am I? What am I going to do to make my impact on the world or to shape my community in the way that I see it needs shaping? And so in line with that, a few years ago, I think 2012 is the first year that we gave this award. We started giving the Natalia Twersky Educator Award, which is named for the mother of our founding director, Natalia Twersky, who's the mother of Gail Twersky Reamer. And Natalia Twersky was really an incredible woman. She survived Auschwitz, came to the US, and though she had gone through this incredibly and deeply traumatic experience, came out feeling very strongly that her children and her nieces and nephews should have a strong Jewish education and a strong connection to learning about their heritage and about Judaism and Jewish ritual, religion, etc. And so this is really a way for us to both honor her legacy and honor educators who are in our community and in our network who are doing really incredible work. So I want to congratulate Debbie once again on winning this award last year, and also want to say that we're really excited to hear about the things that are going on in your classrooms and in your communities, whether that's you or you're thinking about nominating somebody else for this award, which is also possible. We really want to recognize people who are weaving the stories of Jewish women into their classrooms as they're teaching their students to sort of develop their Jewish identities and own their roles as people and leaders in their communities. And I should say that you'll see from this lesson plan, but a hallmark that we look for in the Twersky Award applications are people who are providing opportunities for their students to deeply engage with some primary sources that feature women's voices, so or the experience of women. So really thinking about not just memorizing facts and having that be the way that we teach history, but rather looking deeply at the stuff that people have made in history and using that as a way to understand the world then and understand our world now. So now I'm going to turn it over to Debbie, who's going to introduce herself. Laura, welcome. I see you came in while I was speaking. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And then Debbie's just going to get rolling here.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. This is a picture from my confirmation way back when. I can be seen right here in the center. And this was a picture I actually shared with my students when doing this lesson to sort of personalize the lesson for them. I grew up in Columbia, Maryland. That's where this takes place, outside the Meeting House, if anybody knows anything about Columbia. And it's a planned city, and it was planned not to have synagogue and church buildings. And so I grew up in a shared space that we shared with different churches and with another synagogue as well. And so that building is in the background and is really sort of reminiscent to me of my my history and my childhood. I went to University of Michigan. I studied English at the University of Michigan, and then went off to rabbinical school at Hebrew Union College, the Reform Seminary, spending a year in Jerusalem, and then coming to the New York campus. I've served three different congregations. Uh, a small congregation in Cary, North Carolina, in the Research Triangle. For 10 years, a congregation in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and now I'm in my fifth year at Congregation Har Shalom in Potomac, Maryland. I write children's books in addition to being an educator and a rabbi. And I have three children of my own. My daughter Ariana just had her bat mitzvah back in December, and then I have two little boys, one who's 7 and one who's 4. So that is a little bit about me and my background. And let me give you a little bit of background about this particular lesson. I have always sort of felt like confirmation is sort of the add-on ceremony at a lot of different synagogues, that there really seems to be less of a connection to Jewish tradition with it than with the other ceremonies and elements of a young Jewish person's life. Um, but I also felt that there was a history to confirmation that should be shared, and this history in particular was important to Jewish women and therefore Jewish young women of today, because confirmation really got its start as a ceremony that women participated in. Um, so I developed this lesson looking at the history of confirmation and drawing comparisons with the experience of our students today to really try to personalize it. So, for example, I don't know if your synagogue has this, but our synagogue does. We have a big wall that has the confirmation pictures dating back to the founding of the congregation. And part of the lesson was bringing the class down to that wall and looking at it as an example of the history of the congregation and really exploring the changes that happened to the congregation that we could see through the pictures, the changing size of the confirmation class, the changing room it took place in, the changing ratio of girls to boys in the confirmation class, pictures that the kids themselves might have known from their experience in in um in participating in Congregation Har Shalom. So that's the picture that's over here, is the picture of two of our 10th graders looking at some of the pictures. I believe that Adele is perhaps finding her aunt who had her confirmation also. Um, so let me move on a little bit more and tell you how I sort of structured the lessons and this unit of study. It was 4 lessons, and one of the goals was to look at the history of confirmation, to have the students figure out from different historical documents what the customs of confirmation were, and then to personalize those customs for our particular class. So we started by looking at this picture from the first confirmation class of the Vine Street Synagogue in 1869. And I simply asked the students to tell me what they noticed in the picture. And what things sort of struck them in the picture that they were looking at. And what they pointed out were things like the dresses that the women were wearing or the girls were wearing, the fact that there were more girls than boys, um, the flowers that they were holding. Um, what else do you notice from this particular picture? Is there something that sort of stands out for you in this picture?
Yeah, so if you want to jump in, you feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in, Alana and anyone else who wants to use their audio. And I know that Laura and Mariana, you might decide too that you're gonna type in the chat, and that's okay too.
So the
So can you hear
yeah,
me?
the fact that they aren't smiling, which of course is old time photography, was something that our students brought up, and it was really funny when we got to confirmation several months later, and we took our confirmation picture. The students suggested that maybe we take a picture with everybody kind of frowning and looking like they were in the picture back from the Vine Street temple. Um, Mariana, I do not know who the boy is that's in the picture. If you look at lots of these confirmation pictures, many of them will feature um, one boy among um, a number of girls. So let's move on to the next picture. Um, Alana, I am not sure where the Vine Street Temple is. I have it in my notes and in the curriculum itself, but it's escaping me now where it's located. But I can get back to you with that later on. So here is another picture, this one a little bit later, from the year 1888 from Temple, Israel in Columbus, Ohio. And I wanted to ask what struck you about this picture? Are there things that perhaps are different or the same as the previous picture we saw? He feels more formal and posed. The rabbi looks cooler than in the last one. It looks like a family portrait, the way they're standing, sitting, and arranged. Much less formal than the previous picture. Funny, I thought it looked less formal. Yes, about the family portrait. So you might be able to sort of have a conversation with the students about the fact that it does look like a family portrait, and maybe what does that tell us about perhaps the relationship between the children in the picture. The Vine Street Synagogue is in Nashville. One thing that I pointed out in this particular picture was the variety of ages of the children that are in the picture. The young girl at the end looks quite young, but some of the students look quite a bit older, and that was part of the history of confirmation. The age of confirmation fluctuated over the course of time, and it wasn't always set at 16 years old, but was at a variety of different times. So let's move on to the next picture. So here we have a confirmation class from Tyler, Texas in 1915. And it has a lot of the same theme as we've seen before. Um, the crazy bows, and that's one of the reasons that I included this picture, was because the hairstyle was just so fun to look at. And that was one of the fun things of doing this lesson with the students, is we got to look back at sort of the styles of the changing styles over the course of time. As you can see, we're kind of moving forward in history, and we're back again, of course, to one boy. Um, and we're also the students maybe look a little bit more uniform in age, I think. Okay, let's move on. And the fact that it looks more relaxed and low key, so different from the last one, I think that that does point to the fact that confirmation customs really do vary from synagogue to synagogue. There's a variety of different customs that we see, and so the minhag is very different, and the personality of the congregation is very different, depending on the time and the congregation itself. So here we are in 1926. Um, Tell me what you notice about this picture. So where is the rabbi? And at first I thought perhaps the rabbi was the person in the center, but I have a feeling that the rabbi isn't in the picture. I think that that's one of the confirmands, but I'm not sure. And the fact that it's on the bima, there's more ritual objects. I think that the flag is, really a key element to this particular picture. I used it as a jumping off point to talking about confirmation as a way of being sort of accepted into the greater community and representing that acceptance of churches have confirmation services, and so synagogues developed confirmation services that were parallel in some ways. In the original lesson plan, we're not going to be looking at it today. I did show pictures of an early confirmation class from Germany, where confirmation got its start. And the fact here that the students seem to be holding prayer books and certificates, and the flowers are still there, but they're more on the floor, is also definitely a change and something different. Okay, let's move on to our next picture here. Um, let's see. Edda, do you know where the picture is here?
Yeah, I think this was like just a summing up slide, so I think we can
okay.
go. This is probably the one you're
Okay.
looking for, right?
Okay, yes, yeah. Okay, so tell me what you see in this picture. How does it look different or the same as pictures that we've seen before? So many more students, yes. The students look much younger, and the boys are holding scrolls and the girls flowers. All the girls are wearing dresses and holding flowers. The girl on the left is about to fall asleep. That's true. And there is a plain background. You really can't figure out where the setting is. It looks like it might even be some sort of photo shoot. No Torah, etc. Very good. Anything else? The rabbi looks severe. That's true. This was um, somewhat of a trick picture that I threw. Um, Everyone looks like they don't want to be there. It's possible. Um, I threw in as something that I thought would be interesting for the students and sort of fun. This is actually a picture not from a synagogue, but it is a church confirmation at just about the same time. So it's from Portland, Oregon, 1920, and it is from a church. And really, yes, it's larger, and the girls are, are holding flowers, and the boys are not, and the pastor in the middle looks severe, but it is sort of indistinguishable from the earlier pictures that we saw. So, well, let's move on to our next picture. And this is both a picture or a historical item, plus it gives us a chance to study something about one of the great heroines of American Jewish life, Henrietta Zold. As you can see, I put a link to the Jewish Women's Archives site and their entry about Zold so that we could learn a little bit about her as we studied this particular program for confirmation. If we look at this confirmation program, what is it that strikes you about it? Is there anything in it that maybe we wouldn't see today in a confirmation program? No Hebrew. Okay, yes, there's a little bit of Hebrew right in the center, but really very little. No Jewish date. Okay, great. So you can see that it's coming from what might be sort of um, perhaps more of a reform background of the 1875. Um, it very formal, looks Germanic in style and font, and in fact, you may not be able to see it, but some of the words, the hymn that's there in the center, or I guess it's more of a pledge that the confirmands are making, is actually written in German, not in English. And so the confirmation service is, or a program, is both Hebrew, English, and German. And Shavuot, of course, has the Ashkenazi pronunciation. And so this, I thought, was a really interesting artifact to share with the students because we worked a lot on what our program was going to look like and how it was going to reflect where we were, today, it was 2014, so in 2014 as young confirmands. And this program in 1875 really represents where the Hanover Street Temple was, with German being still very important and Ashkenazi pronunciation and the like. Okay. This was in Baltimore, I believe. I mean, it was either in Baltimore or in Philadelphia, one of the two. Let's move on to the next. So here we have a very formal confirmation pose from 1948 at B'nai Jeshurun in New York City. Um, Anything strike you in particular about this picture that we can talk about? The men's hats. Just the formality of the room. Wonderful. Looks like a wedding party. The massive amounts of flowers. We can see the wealth of this particular community from this picture, both the flowers and just the edifice of the building and everything about it. Okay, let's move on to our next picture here. And here we have Nancy Wolkenberg Greenblatt recalling her confirmation experience from 1948. She's one of the people represented here. 1948 was a seminal year for me. I was one of 15 girls who were in the confirmation class of 5708. Amazingly, I can identify more than half in the photograph. We decided to continue as the Confirmands League, meeting for regular study on Shabbat afternoons in the home of Rabbi Panitz. It was a wonderful and enlightening experience to see my rabbi as a family man in his home environment. I remember his eldest son, Jonathan, who became a chaplain at the U.S. Naval Academy as a baby in the crib. So here we have one person reflecting on her experience 50 years later, approximately, and what this confirmation meant to her. And at this point, we spent a lot of time talking as a class about what confirmation meant to them and what their friendships with one another meant to them. This was the point where I pulled out my own confirmation picture that we saw at the beginning, and I talked about the different people in the confirmation picture, and I was able to name, a great many of them and tell them a little bit about what the different people were doing. And it got us talking a little bit about reflection pieces that I wanted the students to write as part of their confirmation service. And so that was how we handled this part of our curriculum. Does anybody have any
Debbie?
thoughts? Yes.
Yes, so I'm glad you asked, because I do have a thought that I'd like to
Okay.
share, and I'm sure other people do too. But one of the things I think is most beautiful about this quote and the fact that you chose this quote is that it's somebody who's an adult and who's looking back on their memory of this, right? So it's the other end of the spectrum from where the students are now. And I think it's just so beautiful and also interesting for kids to imagine, like, where am I going to be? What am I going to be doing? Like, when I look back at this picture in 30 years, what am I going to be looking at? When I look back at this in 15 years, where am I going to be? What am I going to be thinking about? What am I going to be doing? And I think that that's fun, inspiring, etc. for students to think about. And I also love the mention here of the Confirmands League. That's a really interesting jumping off point for students to think about. Do we want to do something together, whether it's all committing to taking a class together or meeting up at somebody's house once a month or going to the movies together? What do we want to do to continue this community? So those are the things I love about this particular excerpt. What do other people think?
Reminds me of the Junior League.
Yeah. Yeah, it does remind me a little bit of that, and also of sort of creating formal structures. I think for some students also, like confirmation or going to religious school is a really formal structure. I think it would be interesting for kids to think about what formal structures they might want to develop, or also think about what are the informal things, as you were mentioning, Debbie, their relationships with each other that connect them to one another.
But it was a formal structure, but it was an informal meeting. So because they were meeting at the rabbi's house and they got to see him as a person.
Yeah. And Laura writing in also to talk about the relationship that the rabbi had with his students and inviting his students in to sort of help maintain that. I think it's interesting, especially if there's a call from students or a desire from students to continue to be engaged. It's good for us to think about, as the adults who are supporting them, what are the ways that we can support that? What are the ways that we can engage them and engage them in ways that feel different and do feel grown up and do feel like they are transitioning into a different role in the community. I'm glad you raised that, Laura. I think that's an interesting point.
Well, and also, of course, 1948 is really a seminal year for the Jewish community, and so the fact that this happens, really against the backdrop of Israel's founding, they must have been confirmed within weeks of Israel's founding. I think really is also an important thing to bring up. Okay, other points. Okay, well, shall we move on then to the next one? So for the next one, we're going to be looking back at a prayer for confirmation from the year 1881 by Rabbi Max Lilienthal, or as he was known, Reverend Dr. Max Lilienthal. And Etta was kind enough to sit here and transcribe the confirmation prayer. It was something that I often would have the kids do as a group activity in our confirmation class, just to give something different for them to do, sort of a little bit of a challenge for them, because the handwriting is so difficult to read. So we read through this blessing that you can see up on the screen, and then we talked about the fact that that we were going to be writing our own blessing for their confirmation service. I see that that somebody brought up, that Alana brought up the idea of reverend, and at this time period, it was not uncommon for rabbis to go by the name Reverend or Reverend Doctor, especially from the more liberal branches of Judaism. It was a way to sort of fit in with the greater community. So he was not the only one who used that title. So we looked at this blessing, and we talked about the different themes that we saw in this this blessing, and then we talked about whether we thought that the same themes still applied to us today, and if so, how we could make it in how we could modernize the wording, and then also to add new ideas and new thoughts into the blessing. And so it was a project that we worked on together and directly resulted in something that we used as part of our confirmation service. Thoughts about this prayer of confirmation, or um, the way of using it as a jumping off point to writing our own prayer. Did they write it as a group? We broke into small groups, and the small groups wrote their own blessings, and then we came back together, and as a group, we wrote it as a single blessing. Anything else? Well, let's move on then to our next. So this is sort of a general overview of how this confirmation unit progressed. In the first class session, we looked at the old photos and we discussed the conventions of confirmations, similarities, and differences. We looked at also some traditional Jewish sources that reflected what was happening in the pictures and the customs of confirmation. In session 2, we explored confirmation in other religious traditions, as well as in American and European Jewish history. So we talked about confirmation as a link to the greater community around them, and the idea of confirmation as one of the sort of symbols of assimilation. And then we also looked at the confirmation class in Germany, and that was particularly poignant because that whole class survived the Holocaust by leaving together and escaping, and the rabbi went in a different direction, I believe, to maybe even to Shanghai, and also survived the Holocaust. And so that was a very interesting element to the confirmation unit. Class session 3, we looked at the picture from B'nai Jeshurun and the quote from 1948, and we talked about what the students were going to perhaps write in their own reflection pieces about confirmation. And we then had a homework assignment for the students, which was to write a reflection piece that could be included in the service, and also to collect a few pictures that represented their own history of their Jewish journey up to the point of confirmation, so that when we put together a confirmation booklet, that it itself was a history of this particular confirmation class. And in session 4, we studied the prayer for confirmation, and then we worked together to create this class pledge to use in the class's confirmation service. Let's open it up for discussion and any questions that you might have about this arc of the confirmation unit. Thank you, Alana. Also helps them see him as part of a long history of confirmation, something larger. I was wondering how the students received it generally and what was their reaction to it. I I was able to kind of capture their attention, and what they produced at the end was really, really good. Um, and I think that they had a really positive reaction to that. I think it added to the meaning of their confirmation service because they had more sort of a deeper understanding of what confirmation meant and could see themselves linked to other young people in the past. Will the pictures be available for us to use? Yes, I believe that they're on the JWA site, and so definitely they're there to be downloaded and used. Um, if I was going to do it again, what would I change, add, move, etc.? Um, I think I would just tweak little parts of it, sort of depending on who was in the confirmation class in particular. So I'm not sure that there would be anything in particular that I would be changing, but I know that I would end up tweaking it just because of who the class was and what they would react to. Let's move on and see what this is. So, so here's sort of one example of the type of pictures that the students came up with themselves. Here we have the same girl as a confirmand here, and here she is dressed for Purim. And so these were the types of pictures that the students brought to me, pictures showing themselves at different times in their Jewish journey, leading up to confirmation itself.
Debbie, if you think, and if people are interested, I'm glad to sort of pull up one of the packet that you sent me where students had done the reflective writing, if that's okay to share that with people.
Sure, definitely.
Okay. Let me grab that. If other people have questions, feel free to write in. I'm just going to pull that up so you all can see it.
The first time you see goofiness in the pictures. That's true, except that the students really found the pictures of the different styles at different times as something that was goofy. So there was an awful lot of laughing that went on. And then when I shared my own confirmation picture, that was also something that they could react to in a way that was a little bit more lighthearted.
Let's try this. So I'll just say a few things by way of being forward-thinking about the Twersky Award while this is coming up, which is, I think a few of the pieces that I want to highlight about Debbie's lesson are, one, we see sort of real engagement with the primary sources. Students are doing some analysis of those primary source documents, and then they're going beyond that analysis in order to draw some connections. What about this language, the language in this prayer might we want to use in our own prayer? What about this person's reflections? What does this person's reflection on her own confirmation experience make us think or imagine about our confirmation experience, or how do we feel about our experience right now? And I think also, I'm not sure how explicit this was, Debbie, but again, the fact that we're looking at these pictures that were created over 100 years ago, in the case of Henrietta Zold, this document that is from her confirmation from over 100 years ago, and thinking about what are the pieces of stuff that we're creating, whether it's photographs we're taking or things that we're writing, that we are using to document our lives and the stories that we have now, that we're shaping now.
And that really, so this is just some of the work samples of what we did with having charts to help them sort of like really work in groups and come up with what we were, hoping that they would reflect on. Here's one of their
This looks like a transcription that somebody did.
Transcription.
Okay, this isn't what I thought it was. So
Yeah, it's not. You're that's the work samples from lessons 1 and 2, and I think it was 3 and 4
Yeah,
probably.
We're gonna get the other one because I know it's the one with the like bold colors on it. I think it would be cool for people to see that. Bear with us. Thank you for being patient.
I can pull it up on my computer too. Does that work or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay. Make this bigger. Okay.
So here we have. So here we just have let me see the drawing. So this is Ethan Adler's reflection piece. This is Ethan right here in the middle of the picture, and he has a picture with his BBYO chapter, something that's very, very important to him, and then sort of a reflection about what BBYO has meant to him and what this community has meant to him, the friends that he's made and how it's impacted his Jewish identity.
Yeah, let's look at one more. Where's my scroll? Here we go.
There we go. Okay, so this is actually a really interesting picture. It's from one of our congregational retreats. The boy who it's his reflection is Jacob right here, but right over here is Ethan Adler, who we saw in the picture before, and here's Julie, who was the young girl who was dressed as Queen Esther earlier, and there's probably 1 or 2 other kids from the confirmation class in this picture. So even though it's his picture, he's sharing pictures of other people that are part of the confirmation class as part of his reflection piece. Our congregation does a yearly retreat, and some of the closest friendships in the congregation have been formed over the course of time on these retreats.
Awesome. Debbie, do you have anything else you want to sort of say in closing before I just say a few words about the Twersky Award and then we wrap up for the afternoon?
No, I mean, thank you so very much, everybody, for signing in, and I'm, certainly available if anybody ever has any questions about this curriculum. I would be more than happy to, to talk it over with you and to see it be used elsewhere would be wonderful.
Awesome. So I just want to say a couple things more about our Twersky Award. This is sort of the time of year when a lot of people are getting ready for the award. And we've made a few changes to the award this year so that it's easier to apply to and it's also easier to nominate other people for it. So this award right now is open to anyone who's teaching in any Jewish educator teaching in a Jewish setting with students in grades 6 through 12. So we try to focus on that age because the people on the selection committee felt it was difficult to compare people who were teaching high school to people who were teaching elementary school. So we tried to really sort of narrow it to the people who are working with older students in that 6 to 12th grade group. There are 2 also, for the first time this year, there are 2 prizes available. So the winner receives $2,000 plus $400 for their school or program, and the finalist receives $500 plus $100 for their school or program that you can use to use towards field trips or towards enhancing your classroom. Mariana, I see you're asking about sort of how women have to be integrated. So it doesn't have to be solely about women. In fact, it's our hope that you're integrating and sort of weaving the stories of women into your curriculum generally, and that the lesson plan you submit is an example of that. So if we take a look at this slide, there are a couple other examples I can mention, and sort of if you go to our site to jwa.org/Twersky, you can see examples of the kinds of lessons that have been done before. So for example, this piece up here is actually it's written out, but a version of a Twitter feed. So somebody was learning about activism, and they studied the civil rights movement. They read some newspaper articles that published a diary of a Jewish female civil rights activist, and they had their students write a live as if they were tweeting while they were on the Freedom Rides. So they were learning about activism, they were thinking about communal change, they were thinking about social justice, and they used the story of a woman and these newspaper articles in order to get the information out, in order to sort of explore those ideas. This picture down here is from our first lesson, the 2012 winner, Allison Matana, who had her students, actually Purim is coming up. Her lesson plan is about Purim, so I encourage you to take a look at it. Her lesson was asking students to learn about women from the labor movement and then decide if they made change more like Esther made change or more like Vashti made change. So first they studied the Purim story and looked at these two women, Esther and Vashti, in the Purim story, and talked about how they stood up for what they believed in different ways. And then the students looked through speeches and primary source documents and decided which of these activists were more like Esther, more like Vashti. And then she had some other things to teach them about the labor movement at that time, and one of them was that they all had to sew buttons onto pieces of felt, and if they didn't do it fast enough, it was harder for them to get snack. So that was a little simulation that she did about sweatshop work. And then here we have a picture of Ariel Horn-Levinson, who was, she's a day school educator, and she was doing a unit on the colonial period, and so she actually dressed up as a particular woman from that time period, did a little role play, and then had her students look at a document from this woman's life and do some learning around that. So there are a variety of different ways that you can learn about it. Mariana, I will definitely give you more information about the award. You can start by looking here at jwa.org/Twersky, and all of the requirements are there, and the application is online. We do ask for a chunk of information from you. So a statement of purpose that sort of sums up what you were trying to do, how you were trying to accomplish that, the lesson plan itself, which needs to include citations for any primary source documents that you use. An example of a classroom product, so you saw the handouts that Debbie used, that's what she sent to us. Some examples of student work, again, the photographs and reflections that students put together. And this year we also added a letter of support, and one of those should come from either a person who nominates you or from a supervisor, but the other can come from anyone. So it would be great if you had one of your students write in about the lesson, or a colleague or friend, a parent, etc. So those are sort of the different requirements. The deadline, I don't know if I said this before, but the deadline is until May 11th, so there's plenty of time and several big holidays in between now and then that people are often teaching about and provide generative jumping off points. The submission has to have been implemented by the time you are submitting it, yes, because you need to submit examples of student work as part of the lesson or as part of the submission. So that's part of how there's actually a separate committee that reviews all of the lessons, which is fun for them, and also a very large task. And they feel that in order to evaluate the quality of a lesson, we really need to see how students were engaging with it in some way. And so, yes, it does need to be implemented. There's tons of information online about the award, and also if you have questions, you can always reach out to me. I'll be sending you all a follow-up email after this with links also to the recording and to the PowerPoint from this. I've given you the link in the chat already to Debbie's lesson plan. And if you want to see a very different example of an award-winning lesson plan, you can join us next month. Our online learning program next month will be featuring a lesson by Rabbi Mike Rothbaum, who's from the Bay Area, and he did a really interesting sort of Torah interpretation, midrash, and art project with his students in the style of this really interesting artist, Jewish artist Barbara Kruger. So his students learned a little bit about Barbara Kruger, and then they made some art in her style and used actually parts of Jewish texts that they were studying at the time. So please join us next month if you're interested in seeing another example of this. And again, all of these lesson plans are available on our site.